It started with a flimsy wooden board planted crookedly into the grass, sidewalk repair zone. No cones, no caution tape, just that one cheap sign slapped near the curb. I remember rolling my daughter Ellie's wheelchair onto the driveway, ready for our usual afternoon stroll. The sun was out, birds chirped, and the neighborhood felt safe until it didn't. We didn't know the sidewalk had been ripped open that morning. No one from the HOA sent a notice. No email, no heads up. I later learned it was Karen. Yes, that Karen, the self-appointed queen of our HOA, who had called in the work without informing anyone. Her reasoning? It looked uneven and messy. But nothing was messy compared to what came next. Ellie, full of excitement, pushed forward with her arms before I could stop her. The next moment was chaos. Her front wheels dipped hard. She screamed, and her body jolted as the wheelchair lurched and sank into wet, unset concrete. I dropped everything and ran to her. My baby was stuck, terrified, legs already submerged in thick, cold cement. I screamed for help. Neighbors peeked through their windows but didn't come out. A man in a suit walked past, glanced, and walked faster. Ellie cried harder. I tried lifting the chair, but it was heavy and lodged. The cement sucked at it like quicksand. That's when Karen walked out of her house. Clutching a clipboard, wearing her usual smug expression, she marched right over like she was doing us a favor. "You should have read the sign," she said, voice dry as dust. "Can't help poor parenting." I was shaking, trying not to scream. My daughter, a disabled child, had just fallen into a hazard she caused, and all she could do was blame me? By the time emergency services arrived, Ellie was pale, freezing, and in pain. Firemen chipped the cement away, like it was a rescue mission from rubble. We were shaken, humiliated, and furious. Karen stood, watching the whole thing with a smirk. That's when I knew. This wasn't going to end with a simple apology or insurance claim. This was war. The next morning, I expected some remorse, an apology, maybe even silence. But instead, there was a bright red flyer taped to my door. Urgent HOA notice. Residents must take responsibility for supervising minors during sidewalk repairs. Underneath, it was signed Karen M., HOA Vice President. I crumpled the paper in my fist. I walked right over to her perfectly trimmed lawn. She was watering her petunias like she hadn't almost gotten a child seriously injured. I held up the flyer. "You're seriously blaming me for what happened to Ellie?" I asked, my voice trembling. Karen didn't even flinch. "I'm not blaming," she said coolly. "I'm reminding. Liability is tricky, you know." "Liability?" I snapped. "My daughter could have broken her legs, and you're worried about liability?" Karen raised an eyebrow. "I told the contractors to put up a sign. It's not my fault if people don't supervise their children." "She's in a wheelchair," I growled. "She's not just a child. She's disabled. That sidewalk was our only safe path." Karen's lips tightened. Then maybe she shouldn't be using it during active repair. I could have slapped her. Instead, I turned and walked away. But the fury burned deep. Later that evening, I contacted the HOA president. He hadn't known about the construction. Apparently, Karen had fast-tracked the order without consulting the board. She said it was a tripping hazard, he told me. It wasn't just negligence. It was personal. Karen had always looked at Ellie with pity wrapped in judgment. She hated when Ellie's wheelchair left little tread marks on the sidewalk. Damaging common property, she once said during a meeting. She pretended to care about order, but really she just wanted control. Ellie, meanwhile, had nightmares that night. She cried in her sleep, mumbling, "I'm stuck, Mama. I can't move." That broke me. I knew I couldn't just let it slide. I had to fight back, not just for Ellie, but for every family that Karen's reign of clipboard tyranny had affected. And so I did what any angry, protective mother would do. I started documenting every sign, every crack, every inconsistency. I was going to bring her down, HOA queen or not. And it started with one word: accountability. Word spread faster than I expected. The incident made its way into the neighborhood Facebook group by the next day. Someone, I still don't know who, posted a blurry photo of Ellie being lifted from the concrete, wrapped in an emergency blanket. The caption said, "Why wasn't this sidewalk blocked off?" The post exploded. Some people were sympathetic. "That poor girl," one mom wrote. "Why didn't we get any notice about repairs?" Others, of course, defended Karen. The sign was there. Personal responsibility matters. But the ones that got under my skin were the silent ones, neighbors who'd seen us struggling, seen my daughter scream in panic, and still did nothing. I didn't care. I had a plan now. That evening, I printed out photos of the broken pavement, the half-sunk sign, and the flyer Karen had taped to my door. I put everything into a binder labeled Negligence by HOA Vice President. I wasn't just angry anymore. I was organized. Ellie was recovering, but her mood had changed. She didn't want to go outside. She didn't even want to roll out onto the porch. "What if it happens again?" she whispered. "What if there's another hole?" That killed me. A week later, the HOA board finally held an emergency meeting. It was supposed to be quiet, just an internal review, but I showed up anyway. Karen didn't even look at me when I walked in. She sat in the middle of a table, arms folded, face set like stone. I raised my hand. "I want to speak." "You're not on the agenda," Karen said. "I don't care." I said, "My daughter was dumped in wet cement because of this HOA's negligence. That sidewalk was not properly closed. There was no notice. And I have proof." I opened the binder and slid it across the table. The room went silent. Karen's jaw clenched. "This is out of line." "No, Karen," one of the board members replied. "What you did was out of line." For the first time, I saw a flicker of something in her eyes. Fear. Word spread faster than I expected. The incident made its way into the neighborhood Facebook group by the next day. Someone, I still don't know who, posted a blurry photo of Ellie being lifted from the concrete, wrapped in an emergency blanket. The caption said, "Why wasn't this sidewalk blocked off?" The post exploded. Some people were sympathetic. "That poor girl," one mom wrote. "Why didn't we get any notice about repairs?" Others, of course, defended Karen. The sign was there. Personal responsibility matters. But the ones that got under my skin were the silent ones, neighbors who'd seen us struggling, seen my daughter scream in panic, and still did nothing. I didn't care. I had a plan now. That evening, I printed out photos of the broken pavement, the half-sunk sign, and the flyer Karen had taped to my door. I put everything into a binder labeled Negligence by HOA Vice President. I wasn't just angry anymore. I was organized. Ellie was recovering, but her mood had changed. She didn't want to go outside. She didn't even want to roll out onto the porch. "What if it happens again?" she whispered. "What if there's another hole?" That killed me. A week later, the HOA board finally held an emergency meeting. It was supposed to be quiet, just an internal review, but I showed up anyway. Karen didn't even look at me when I walked in. She sat in the middle of a table, arms folded, face set like stone. I raised my hand. "I want to speak." "You're not on the agenda," Karen said. "I don't care," I said. "My daughter was dumped in wet cement because of this HOA's negligence. That sidewalk was not properly closed. There was no notice. And I have proof." I opened the binder and slid it across the table. The room went silent. Karen's jaw clenched. "This is out of line." "No, Karen," one of the board members replied. "What you did was out of line." For the first time, I saw a flicker of something in her eyes. Fear. After the meeting, a few neighbors started coming forward. One woman told me Karen had fined her $75 for leaving her trash bin out 15 minutes past pickup. Another man said Karen threatened to report him for painting his mailbox an unapproved shade of brown. All petty stuff, but it added up. Karen had been ruling the HOA like a dictator in pearls and slacks. I got curious. I pulled the HOA bylaws from the community website and read through them like it was my job. Karen had cited rules that didn't exist. She created her own standards under the label of beautification, then enforced them without board approval. When I showed this to the president, a quiet man named Greg, who clearly hated confrontation, he sighed. "She's been doing this for years. Nobody wants a challenger." Why not? Because Karen bites back. I didn't care. I wasn't scared of her bark, not after what she'd done to Ellie. I compiled a file of complaints, copied from emails, old messages, and community forum posts. Turns out Karen had ruffled quite a few feathers, especially with disabled residents, parents, and elderly homeowners. It wasn't just Ellie's incident, it was a pattern. Karen didn't just ignore accessibility, she actively got in its way. Still, when I tried to rally people to formally remove her, most of them hesitated. We support you, they said, but we don't want drama. That's the thing about HOAs. People pay dues, mow lawns, and avoid eye contact. No one wants to poke the queen bee. But I wasn't backing down. I talked to a local news outlet, gave them every detail. They took photos of the cracked sidewalk and even spoke to Ellie. I was scared, she told them. I thought I'd never get out. The story went up online with the headline, "Disabled Girl Trapped in HOA Neglect." It hit harder than I expected. Karen tried to spin it as misinformation, but the evidence was right there, in her own paperwork, her own words. I didn't need a revolution. I just needed the truth loud enough to drown out her control. The pressure started mounting on Karen. After the news story went viral, local shares, then national coverage, HOA inboxes flooded. Parents, disability advocates, and random strangers were furious. The HOA's official email had over 700 unread messages overnight. Karen couldn't hide behind her flyers anymore. So, she did what people like her always do. She staged a fake apology. She showed up on my doorstep with a bouquet of half-wilted daisies and a notepad. I wanted to offer my condolences, she said with a stiff smile. And I've written a formal apology we can send to the press. I stared at her. You want to write my response for me? I just thought we could present a unified message, she said. Something like an unfortunate incident, but the HOA is taking safety very seriously moving forward. Unbelievable. You don't care about my daughter, I said. You care about your image. Karen blinked. Well, perception is everything in these matters. I took the flowers and shut the door in her face. The next day, she published her personal statement on the HOA's website. It read like a PR spin. I deeply regret the unfortunate events that occurred and am working to ensure sidewalk repairs are better communicated in the future. Not once did she say Ellie's name. Not once did she say disabled child. She called it an event like we were talking about a blocked gutter. I forwarded her post to the journalist who wrote the original story. Within 24 hours, they updated the headline. HOA VP offers generic apology after child falls in cement. The comments section exploded. And the neighborhood? The tide was turning. Someone chalked "Resign Karen" in front of the HOA office. A petition began circulating. At first, it had 10 names, then 50, then 100. Quiet neighbors were finally finding their voices. Still, Karen refused to step down. This is harassment, she said at the next board meeting. I followed the process. But she hadn't, and now everyone knew it. Her fake apology only made things worse. The cement wasn't the only thing cracking anymore. So was Karen's grip. I didn't expect the security footage. It came from Mr. Delaney, a quiet veteran who lived across the street. He'd been watching the drama unfold but hadn't said much. Then, one evening, he stopped by my porch with a USB drive and a thermos of coffee. You might want to see this, he said. My camera's caught everything. I plugged it into my laptop, and there it was, clear as daylight. The footage showed Karen supervising the sidewalk crew earlier that morning. She walked right past the broken patch multiple times, clipboard in hand. She even waved away a worker who tried to put up proper caution tape. Then came the moment that shattered her defense. Ellie rolled toward the curb, excited like always. Karen saw her, saw us, and didn't say a word. She watched it happen. Watched my daughter roll straight into wet cement, scream in fear, and still did nothing. No warning, no movement, just a smirk on her face. The kind of smirk you remember forever. I sent the footage to the HOA board, the journalist, and the online petition organizer. Within hours, the clip was everywhere: TikTok, Facebook, Reddit. People were outraged. That woman watched a child get hurt and smiled. Karen is the final boss of HOA evil. Even major news outlets picked it up. Karen tried damage control. She claimed the footage was out of context, but context didn't change her inaction or her expression. The next HOA meeting was packed. Standing room only. Neighbors who hadn't attended a meeting in 5 years were there, angry and ready. Karen tried to call order, but no one listened. Greg, the HOA president, stood up and took a deep breath. "We're holding a vote," he said. Effective immediately, the board will vote on the removal of Vice President Karen M. for misconduct, negligence, and abuse of authority. The room burst into applause. Karen stood there frozen, still clutching her clipboard as the world she'd built, one passive-aggressive flyer at a time, began to crumble. And I sat there holding Ellie's hand, knowing that justice might finally be coming. The vote wasn't close. Out of 7 board members, 6 voted to remove Karen immediately. The 7th abstained, probably scared of being the lone holdout. Karen sat rigidly in her seat, lips pursed so tight they almost disappeared. When Greg read the final count, she didn't even argue. She simply stood up, gathered her things, and walked out of the room like she was still in charge. But her reign was over. The following week, the board formally apologized, not a PR spin, but a real apology. Public, written, and delivered in person. Greg came to our home, sat with Ellie, and said, "I failed you and I'm sorry." We all did. It wasn't perfect, but it meant something. The HOA started making real changes. They added strict guidelines for notifying residents about construction, mandated accessibility reviews before sidewalk repairs, and required that any hazardous work be clearly blocked off with cones, tape, and alternative routes provided. They even offered to redo our entire sidewalk with a custom ramp designed specifically for Ellie's needs. But more than that, they let me help. I was invited to join the Safety and Accessibility Committee. Me, the mom who used to get ignored at meetings, suddenly I had a voice, and I used it. Ellie still had some healing to do. Physically, she was okay, but emotionally, there were scars. She flinched near construction zones, avoided sidewalks for weeks. But slowly, with therapy and time, she began rolling out onto the porch again, one small push at a time. The neighborhood changed too. People talked more, helped each other more. The quiet street was no longer just Karen's turf. It was ours again. And as for Karen, she moved out a few months later, put her house up for sale, and left without a goodbye. The only trace of her left behind was that old, crooked sign. We kept it, as a reminder, that standing up matters, that silence can be dangerous, and that sometimes even a cracked sidewalk can reveal everything that's broken underneath. I decided the last chapter shouldn't be mine. It should be Ellie's. So I sat with her, recorder in hand, and asked her to tell me how she remembered it all. At first, she was quiet. Then she said, "It felt like the ground grabbed me and wouldn't let go." Her little hands gripped the sides of her wheelchair as she talked. She remembered the wet feeling around her legs. It was like being swallowed by mud. Cold, heavy. She remembered my face, scared, screaming. She remembered Karen's voice. "You should have been more careful." But I was careful, Ellie whispered. I just didn't see the hole. Ellie talked about the nightmares, the feeling of being stuck, and no one helping. She said the worst part wasn't the pain. It was seeing people look at me and walk away. I cried listening to her, but then she smiled. "It's better now," she said, "because now I know you'll never let me sing again." That crushed me and healed me at the same time. I asked her what she wanted people to know. That even if someone's in a chair, she said, they still have places to go. Simple, brave, honest. She wants to start a blog one day to help other kids like her. I want to tell them it's okay to speak up, even if people think you're small. She's already stronger than most adults I know. This whole nightmare, the wet cement, the blame, the silence, it taught both of us something powerful. You can be pushed down, sunk, ignored, but if you stand up or roll forward, with truth and love behind you, you'll rise. Ellie is rising, and so am I. We won't be defined by that pit. will be defined by the climb out of it and the fight we took on to make sure no one else falls in. This isn't just a story about one bad neighbor. It's a story about strength, about fighting for your child when no one else will, and about a little girl who got stuck in the concrete but refused to stay there.